Hey everybody, Tim here with today's review of James Bond movie number 21, Casino Royale. So this is a terrific movie. It's amazing, and it's like it redefined the series. It basically started over again. So for me, this would be my second introduction to Bond. I had talked about how The World Is Not Enough was kind of my first introduction, but I was too young. I didn't get it. I didn't really understand what was going on, the history, the mythos, so I just kind of like, whatever, that is what it is. So when this movie came out, I had just graduated high school and I was kind of going into the college time, and I will be the first to admit that I was kind of a toxic person. Like, I was not at a good point in my life, just with who I was. And to be honest with you, I think a lot of those like late teens, early 20s, I mean, a lot of people are kind of trying to figure out who they are. And so like at that time, I was more of like the sex, drugs, rock and roll type, and I was really trying to figure out, who am I? And so I didn't really care about movies like that much. Like, I'd love to see them, but it was more for the experience. Like, as long as it was like loud and explosions, like I was totally into it. I didn't really like care about the quality of the movie. So that being said, I had a friend at the time, and it's kind of unfortunate looking back on it, because he tried to show me this movie, and unfortunately, like I said, I was not in the right state where to appreciate it, and I thought it was so boring, and I was like, this is the dumbest movie ever. Like, why are we watching this? And I don't even know if I finished it. I may have left. And it's kind of unfortunate because of the way I was at that time. Our friendship ended up failing, and here it is like 15 years later, and I actually still kind of feel bad about the way that I was, like looking back at it in hindsight. Especially now that I do watch this movie and I love it. Like, it's so good. It's in like my top favorite movies for the James Bond. So to kind of like just random trivia for this movie. So Daniel Craig is his first movie, the blonde, blue-eyed Bond. He is the first actor that is younger than the Bond franchise. Even Pierce Brosnan was actually born before Dr. No came out, whereas Daniel Craig was born in like 1968 or something. And so he's actually younger than the franchise. I think that was just before On Her Majesty's Secret Service came out. So he was actually born right towards the end of the Sean Connery years. So it's kind of interesting though, because like he guaranteed grew up with it, and like I'm assuming here, this is just me making assumptions, that by the time he was in his teens, it would have been like Roger Moore. So he probably grew up with it and like knew all about James Bond. Now, for the movie itself, the rumor is, I don't know how true this is, that like the last movie with Pierce Brosnan did not do that great, The Die Another Day. Was it Die? Yeah, it was Die Another Day. And like, so they really wanted to do something different, and there had been all sorts of talks about it. Like, Quentin Tarantino wanted to do a movie like that was black and white and have Pierce Brosnan come back, but like the actual producers like Broccoli really wanted to do something new, just completely redefine the franchise. Let's just stop and re-look at ourselves. And during all of this, Batman Begins came out, where if you look at like the last Batman movie, it would have been Batman and Robin. It was loud, it was colorful, it was over the top, and like it was all gadgety and like, look at this, and it was funny. So, and then sure enough, Christopher Nolan's like, no, let's redo this. And he brought it down, kind of put it in the real world, like made literally, not figuratively, but literally made it darker, where it's more like gray tone, more black tone. So like, it's not just all of these bright colors. And just kind of made it more relatable a little bit, kind of made it more real. And Batman Begins blew up. It was fantastic. It's exactly what all the fans wanted. It's what everybody needed. And so the producers for Bond were kind of like, why don't we look at that? And sure enough, like if you kind of look at Batman Begins and you look at Casino Royale, and then you even look at the previous movies where you look at Batman and Robin and you look at Die Another Day, like you can kind of see the similarities. And so this movie has a little bit of gadgetry, like I would say actually thinking about it, I think the only gadget in this movie is like the defibrillator, and that's not even a gadget. Like, I'm sure like actual cars probably have those. And so they took away the gimmicks, they took away the gadgets. They literally made the entire film darker, like the whole opening sequence is in black and white. And so they made it more realistic, and it worked. Like, this movie is so good. And I don't know, for me, I really enjoyed this movie, because if you look at some of the Sean Connery movies, the Roger Moore movies, and even arguably the Timothy Dalton movies, like, there are some of those that like don't really have gadgets at all. They are just a pure spy movie. But because it's that 60s, 70s film style and storytelling, for me personally, it can be very, very difficult to get into. And that's where I say, like, I mean, if you guys watch my other 20 reviews for Bond, like, the opening sequence is great, the ending sequence is great, that whole middle, like, sometimes I just have to slog through it. And whereas this one, I felt like actually did a great job. Like, it's chase after chase after chase after chase. Once we finally get to the end, there is some of that where like I started to get a little bogged down, and I'm like, okay, like, it's like Lord of the Rings. There's like 15 endings, and I'm like, can we just stop the movie? Like, that's all we need. Stop the movie. And it continues on probably a little bit longer than it should, to be honest with you. But it's so good, and it's so well told. So, as usual, for those who've seen the other ones, I'll just kind of start from the beginning, work my way down, and just talk about a lot of these scenes that stood out to me, and that I think are worth mentioning, worth talking about. And, I mean, this video is going to be probably the longest Bond video I've done, because there's so much to talk about. With a lot of the Bond videos, like I said, I get to that middle area, and I'm like, there's a chase, and that's it. And then, whereas this one, there's a lot. So like I said, there's the whole black and white opening, which I don't know if I needed. I felt like you could actually have taken that away, and I don't think it would have lost anything. It is a great sequence, don't get me wrong, but I don't know if it's 100% needed. And then they talk about how this is Bond being like promoted to the 00 status, which I'm going to stop right there. This video is going to be so long. I'm going to have to drink while I talk. I'm sorry. I try not to do this unless it's a live one, but... So, what I kind of like about this movie is it has Judi Dench returning as the role of M, and this movie works for two different audiences. If you want to sit back and say, okay, this is a brand new, like retelling of the story. This is brand new. No other Bond has existed before this. This is James Bond. You can watch this movie just fine. It works. If you want to watch this movie and kind of think in your head that the 00 status is something that's passed along and passed along and passed along, this movie works. Like, if you go back to, I think it was On Her Majesty's Secret Service, like that opening sequence where George Lazenby's fighting with the guy in the water, and he's like, this never happened to the other chap. Like, clearly, it's a tongue-in-cheek reference to Sean Connery. And this movie actually works where, let's say, Pierce Brosnan was the last James Bond and retired or was killed or whatever, and so now they've had to hire somebody else, and they just get promoted, and when they get promoted, they basically sell their soul, or however you want to put it, and they just inherit the name James Bond. And it works. Like, you can watch this movie and you're like, okay, this is Bond getting promoted to the 00 status because it's a new Bond. It works. I can dig it. I'm down with it. What I don't understand is when he's sitting there talking to the guy's like, you have to have 2 kills to be promoted to 00. Like, no, I don't like that. Like, that really bothered me. And like I said, if you took this movie and you cut out this whole black and white sequence, wouldn't lose a beat. Like, just go straight into the movie, because like that whole line of like, okay, you only have to kill 2 people to become a 00 agent. Like, how many 00s are there? Like 005,000? Because like, realistically, if you watch the Bond movies, like, there's a ton of deaths. He kills a lot of people. Even in this movie, he kills a lot of people. And so the fact that he only had to kill 2 to become a 00 kind of bothered me. Like, for one, I didn't need that number. Like, don't even tell me what the requirements are. Just be like, oh, congratulations, you're a 00. Like, that's it. Like, that whole line, I didn't really need that. But I did like how they kind of incorporated that whole like bathroom sequence, and he ends up grabbing the gun and shooting towards the audience. And it's the kind of the Eon Productions opening start where Bond shoots, but they incorporated it. It's an actual scene, and I really like that. I thought that was great. So like I said, in my opinion, you could have cut this whole scene out. And like the first actual scene is La Chief, where it's played by the amazing Mads Mikkelsen. I think that's how you say his name. Terrific actor. Like if you guys haven't seen Hannibal, go watch Hannibal. It's great. I'm still waiting for like a final season for Silence of the Lambs or something. So the movie to me actually starts with La Chief and Mr. White. And just kind of their little sequence where it's like them like doing the whole money betting thing. And it's great. And you can instantly kind of goes with the whole cliche Bond thing where like his eyes kind of messed up and he's crying blood, because a lot of Bond villains have some sort of physical thing wrong with them, and so it automatically goes in with that. And it's so much to the cliche where as soon as you see him, you're like, that's the villain right there. So, and it works. The whole opening chase scene, oh my god, it is so good, and it is so beautiful shot. I love the whole scene where he's like, stop touching your ears, or stop touching your bloody ear, which is great. I loved it. But the whole like jumping from the scaffolding and the crane where he like knocks the thing off and it shoots him up, it's such a great scene. Probably my favorite part is where the guy like tosses the gun and he just catches it and tosses it back at him. So good. It's amazing. Like I said, Judi Dench returns, which she's the only character who is kind of brought back. They didn't bring back Miss Moneypenny. They didn't bring back John Cleese as Q. It's just Judi Dench. And it's fine. It works. She's fantastic. Again, I think Lois Maxwell was still alive for this one. I kind of wish I'd seen her opinion. So anyway, they talk about how like he was just recently promoted and how they have a short life expectancy, which is kind of funny because like Timothy Dalton did 2 movies, Pierce Brosnan did 4 movies, and so it's like their lives are kind of gotten a lot shorter compared to like Sean Connery and Roger Moore, who did a lot more movies than both of those, or even George Lazenby did 1. They actually kind of say like, oh, he's like, oh, M stands for, and she's like, utter another word, I'll have you killed. Like, it's so great. I love their reactions back and forth. It's really well done. I love Judi Dench and I loved Pierce Brosnan, but I didn't like their connections. Anytime they talked, it just seemed kind of off to me, whereas Daniel Craig and Judi Dench seemed a lot more natural. Like, it seemed really to flow really, really well. He goes to the Bahamas, him using M user's name and password. She's like, how the hell does he know this? It's great. The whole Demetrios scene was good. It's an interesting chase scene, like him playing poker, and then of course him dying and then going to the airport was a really interesting scene. But honestly, that's the slowest part of the movie, is the whole like airport scene. And even that, like, I was, like, on the edge of my seat, like, what's happening with this? And then just, like, watching them try to blow up the airplane. And you kind of realize, like, oh, this was Lachief's plan, was to say that this airline company is going to bomb with its new invention and then blow it up to collect basically throw the fight. And so it made sense. It was really interesting. Eva Green makes her appearance, which, to be honest with you, this might be the first thing I've actually seen her in or remember seeing her in. I hated her entrance, though. Like, once again, like, I love this movie. I think this is a great movie. But it does have little pieces that I don't like, and I did not like her entrance where she's like, I'm the money, and he's like, every penny of it. Like, no, don't reference Miss Moneypenny unless you're going to have her. I didn't like it. I didn't need it. It just could have just done, say something else. Her name ends up being Vesper, so it's like it was just an awkward scene. Like, it felt very forced. Them quizzing each other was fantastic, very Sherlock type, where he's like, oh, you're an orphan. Well, I think you're an orphan because you said I was an orphan. Stuff like that was great. Here's where we actually come to like the main plot of the movie, where it's just a poker game, and I think this is like the first time they've actually played like flat out poker in the movies. I could be wrong about that because they play a lot of cards. But it was kind of interesting, the whole 10 million buy-in. seeing Lachief attacked was kind of intense, because as him being the big bad villain of the movie, you wouldn't quite expect that. So it's kind of interesting. Vespa in the shower was great. Eva Green just did a fantastic job where she's like, there's blood on my hands. Like, that was great. Felix finally comes back. Terrific actor, terrific character. We haven't seen him since the Timothy Dalton movie, The License to Kill, where it kind of makes sense that, like, for Pierce Brosnan, where they were trying to kind of go in continuity, like, the last time we saw Felix, he had his leg eaten by a shark. So it would make sense that they kind of didn't want him to go that way. And plus they did what Chad or whatever that guy's name was. So it makes sense. But it was great to see Felix. Fantastic. I was really happy. And him like sponsoring Bond because Vespa wouldn't do it. And he's just like, I'm bleeding chips. Speaking of which, the whole poison scene, fantastic, really well done with the whole salt in the glass and the defibrillator. Very, very like dramatic. Like, it was such a good scene. It was so into it. When we finally got to like the naked torture scene, like, that was a little rough. Like, it was intense. I think that's the most naked we've ever seen Bond. I think that may be the most like male nudity we've actually seen in a movie. And I do remember when this movie first came out, they were like, we might get full frontal of Bond. And I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. You don't, and we don't. But it's just him using, like, I think it's a carpet beater or whatever it's called, with the knotted rope, and he's just using it to hit Bond in the balls. And he even says, like, you're gonna die scratching my balls. And sure enough, Mr. White comes in, kills the chief, and it's like, oh wow. Here's where, like, right here is where it's just like boom, 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 boom. There are so many endings where they think Mathis was the leak, and then they tase him and carry him off, and I felt so bad for Mathis. Bond quits, which is like the third time in the entire franchise. We find out that Vespa stole the money, like framed Mathis, and because her boyfriend was like kidnapped by this organization that we don't know what it is, conveniently. And they're basically, they were trying to hold her hostage. They were holding him hostage for her to bring the money. But she kind of set up clues so Bond could follow her. And sure enough, she ends up almost killing herself. Like, she locks herself in the elevator as the building sinks, which it's a really amazing scene where just watching this building sink. But it's really kind of sad where he's sad that she dies, but then when M calls him and he's just like, the bitch is dead. Like, it's a really kind of sad line, but it does make sense. So just overall, like I said, there was so much going on in this whole ending scene. And then finally, like, he tracks down Mr. White. And then it's kind of funny because it appears that Vespa set up Mathis, and M is like, well, we're going to let him go. And Bond's like, don't let him go. Like, keep quizzing him. Who knows? This could have been a triple crossover. And she's like, wow, you don't trust anybody. Like, that was a great scene. And finally, like, we get to the point where Bond tracks down Mr. White, and he gets his final line of the movie. Like, he's Bond, James Bond. And it's really well done. They kind of get all of the little Eon cliches and trademarks in there. It's an amazing movie. I really enjoyed it. I mean, it took me years to learn to appreciate it because of where I was when I was younger and this movie came out. But overall, I really liked it. Really, really enjoyed it. So I'm sure a lot of you have seen this one, so what did you guys think? For those that mostly grew up on the older stuff, did you like this new kind of turn, like this new redirection? For those who more grew up with this redirection, what do you guys think about watching the older ones? And what do you guys think about Daniel Craig overall? Go ahead, let me know. Thank you guys for everything, and I will see you guys next time for Quantum of Solace.